All right, so today we're going to be doing a deep dive on digital signatures and those certificate authorities everybody's talking about. And we got our hands on Professor Ricardo Calix's actual cryptography lecture, like straight out of university. What do you think of this material?
It's kind of wild how much we depend on digital signatures, like without even knowing it right.
Yeah.
Think about it. Every email you send, every time you buy something online, or even when you're just on a secure website, digital signatures are working behind the scenes, making sure you're actually talking to who you think you're talking to, and that nobody's messing with the info you're sending back and forth. The professor had this great analogy with a contract. Like, you want to be totally sure the document you get is the exact one that got sent. No sneaky changes or anything.
Exactly. It's not just about knowing it's from the right person, but that nobody messed with it along the way. So how does a digital signature actually do that? Like, how's that guaranteed?
Okay, so picture this. Before you send that contract, you basically create a unique digital fingerprint of it using this special algorithm they call a hash function. One of the popular ones is SHA-256. And even like the tiniest change to the document would totally change that fingerprint. Then you encrypt that fingerprint using your private key, kind of like your own secret digital stamp. And that encrypted fingerprint, that's your digital signature. You send it along with the document.
Okay, so far so good. We got a unique fingerprint locked up with a private key, but how does the person getting it know it's real? How do they know it's really from you?
Well, that's where this whole public key cryptography thing comes in. They use your public key. Think of it like a decoder ring that anybody can get to unlock that signature and see the fingerprint. Then they run the document. They got through the same hashing algorithm. And if two fingerprints match up perfectly, boom, they know it's the real deal. From you, and nobody messed with it.
Whoa. It's like a whole digital detective thing verifying the evidence. But here's the thing that kind of freaked me out. How do we know that public key actually belongs to you? Couldn't someone just make a fake one and pretend to be like Amazon or something and steal everyone's login info? That's kind of scary.
Oh, absolutely. And that's exactly the problem the professor was talking about.
Yeah.
Just having these public keys floating around isn't enough. We need a way to be completely sure those keys are legit, like they actually belong to who they say they belong to.
Yeah.
That's where these certificate authorities come in. They're like the internet's trust brokers.
Okay, so they're kind of like the bouncers checking IDs at the door. Tell me more. How do they establish that trust?
Well, think of them like the internet's notaries. They do all this serious checking of websites, organizations, individuals before they give them these digital certificates. It's like a digital passport, tying that public key to a specific person or website. And get this, each certificate is actually digitally signed by the CA itself, using their own private key.
So it's like a super secure ID card signed by someone everybody trusts. That makes sense. But how does this actually work when I'm online? Like when I'm browsing?
Your web browser is the key player here. It comes with this list of trusted CAs and their public keys already loaded, like a VIP list built right in. So we go to a website using that HTTPS. You know the secure version of HTTP. Your browser checks the website certificate.
So that's what's happening when I see that little padlock in the address bar. But sometimes I see these scary warnings too, like this website certificate isn't valid or proceed with caution. I always kind of freak out when I see those. What's going on there?
That's your browser, like waving a red flag. It's basically saying, hey, this website certificate isn't from one of our trusted sources or something's not right here. Be careful. It could be that the certificate expired or the website names don't match up. Or, worst case scenario, you might have stumbled onto one of those phishing sites trying to steal your info.
Whoa. So those warnings are really important. It's like our browsers are bodyguard looking out for danger and giving us a heads up. This is crazy. I never realized how much security stuff was happening every time I go to a website.
It's pretty amazing, isn't it? And there's another layer to this that I thought was super interesting. The professor talked about how you actually have more control over this than you might think. You can actually decide which CAs your browser trusts.
Wait, really? So I can choose who I believe in this whole digital certificate thing? That's kind of cool.
Exactly. You're not just stuck with what your browser tells you. You can go in your settings and see the whole list of trusted CAs. And if you see one you don't recognize or trust, you can get rid of it. Of course, you got to do your research before you just start removing stuff. But you having that control puts you in charge of your online security.
I love that. We're not just at the mercy of the internet. We get to decide who we trust. It's like choosing which news sources we want to follow. Speaking of choices, the professor also mentioned something about different kinds of digital signatures, right? What's that all about?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. There are actually different types of digital signatures, each with their own use and level of security. The most common one, which is what we've been talking about, they call it an electronic signature. It's perfect for like everyday stuff online, but for things that need more security, like legal documents or financial transactions, there are these advanced electronic signatures and qualified electronic signatures. Those involve more strict ID checks, and they often need special hardware or software.
So it's like different levels of security clearance for different situations. Makes sense. But let's be real here. Even with all these fancy signatures and trusted authorities, can we ever be totally 100% certain that a digital signature is foolproof? Or is there always a chance someone could crack the code?
That is the million-dollar question, and the professor tackled it head on. The reality is, no security system is perfect. Just like a real lock can be picked with enough skill and the right tools, digital signatures can be attacked too, especially as tech keeps getting better and hackers get more sophisticated.
Okay, that's a little scary. But like, how? What are some ways a digital signature could get messed with?
One way is through what they call brute force attacks. It's where hackers use really powerful computers to try every single combination until they crack the private key. Another weak spot is in the hashing algorithms themselves. Now, algorithms like SHA-256, they're considered super secure today, but there's always a chance they could find a flaw in the future, and then it wouldn't be so secure anymore.
So it's like a constant battle between the good guys trying to make things safer and the bad guys trying to break them. But hold on. If those hashing algorithms could have flaws, doesn't that mean the whole trust system could fall apart? What if a CA gets compromised?
That's a pretty scary thought, and unfortunately it's happened before. If a CA, the people we're supposed to rely on to vouch for everyone else, gets compromised, the consequences can be bad, really bad. It'd be like finding out the place that makes passports got infiltrated. Total chaos, and nobody would trust anything anymore.
Yikes. So what's stopping that from happening?
Well, CAs have to follow super strict rules and security protocols. They get audited and checked all the time to make sure they're keeping things as secure as possible. They multiple layers of protection. Physical security, strong digital safeguards, background checks on employees, like Fort Knox for the internet.
Okay, that's good to know. But let's say just hypothetically a CA did get hacked. What would happen?
Worst case scenario, they could make fake certificates, and then attackers could pretend to be real websites or people. Imagine a hacker getting a fake certificate for a bank's website. They could make a copy of the bank's login page that looks totally real and trick people into giving them their info. It would be a disaster.
Now that's terrifying. So even though these CAs are like the guardians of trust online, we still got to be careful, right?
Exactly. No system is foolproof. CAs are super important for building trust online. But we as users still need to be careful and pay attention. Always double-check those URLs. Look for any signs of phishing scams, and be careful about websites with weird certificates. Don't be afraid to ask questions, look into things, and put your safety first. It's about making smart choices, not just trusting blindly.
So we're all kind of like digital detectives ourselves, always looking for clues that something might be wrong. But with all this talk about digital signatures and certificates, we haven't really talked about how the actual data is protected when it's being sent. I mean, people can still eavesdrop, right? Especially when we're sending sensitive stuff like credit card info or private messages. How do we make sure nobody's snooping on our conversations? You're right, that's another crucial piece. And that's where symmetric encryption comes in. Remember how we were talking about public key cryptography for authentication and digital signatures? Well, for encrypting big chunks of data quickly and securely while it's being sent, symmetric encryption is the way to go. It's like using a single shared secret key to lock and unlock a message.
So both the sender and the receiver have the same key to encrypt and decrypt the message, and that keeps it secret from anyone who's trying to snoop. But wait, how do they share that secret key in the first place without someone stealing it? Sending it over the internet in plain text would be like handing the key to a thief.
You got it. And that's where the beauty of public key cryptography comes back in. It's like a dance between these two encryption methods. We use the receiver's public key, that decoder ring we talked about, to encrypt the shared symmetric key. Only the person it's going to, with their private key, can decrypt it. So the key itself is sent securely, like putting it in a super strong box that only they can open.
Okay, now I see how smart this is. It's like a multi-layered vault for our data.
Yeah.
Public key protects the shared key, and then that shared key is used to encrypt the message itself, so nobody can read it without the key. Mind blown.
It's a pretty remarkable system, isn't it? It's happening all the time behind the scenes. Every time we browse the web, send emails, or buy things online, it's a testament to those cryptographers who design these systems to protect our info in this crazy connected world we live in.
It really is. And it's not just about making things unbreakable, right? The professor also mentioned that how fast it works is important too. What did he mean by that?
Exactly. He said that in cryptography, security and efficiency have to work together. We need strong security for sure, but the algorithms also have to be fast enough to handle all the stuff we do online, all the instant messaging and data transfers. Imagine if it took hours to encrypt and decrypt a simple email. Nobody would use email. Cryptographers are always working on making these algorithms super secure and super fast at the same time. It's like building a high-security vault that can be opened and closed in a second.
So it's all about finding that balance between making things secure and making them actually usable. It's not just about being strong in theory, it's got to work in the real world. This is so fascinating. It's like we're seeing the inner workings of the internet and understanding all the little things that keep our information safe. But before we get too lost in all the technical details, let's bring it back to our listeners. Why should they care about all this? What's the takeaway message?
The takeaway is this. Cryptography might seem complicated, but it affects our lives every single day. Understanding the basics helps us make smarter decisions about our online security. We're not just passive users. We have the power to control our digital footprint.
So it's about taking charge of our online security, not just hoping that everything will be okay. We can be more careful, more aware, and ultimately safer online.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And these days, understanding the basics of cryptography is essential for anyone who wants to be safe and confident online.
Well said. I think this deep dive has been super helpful. We got a glimpse into the world of cryptography and how it keeps us safe online. But before we wrap things up, I have one last question for you. We talked about CAs getting compromised, but the professor also mentioned attacks that go after the digital signatures themselves. What did he have in mind there?
He was talking about some pretty advanced attacks, like collision attacks. Remember how each digital signature uses that unique fingerprint made by the hashing algorithm? Well, in a collision attack, hackers try to find two different documents that make the same fingerprint. And if they can do that, they could swap a real document with a fake one. And the digital signature wouldn't know the difference. It'd be like having a key that can open any lock, a huge security problem.
That sounds super complicated. How do they even do that?
It takes some serious cryptography skills and a ton of computing power. Hackers basically try to find weaknesses in those hashing algorithms, looking for ways to change the data to get the result they want. It's a constant back and forth, with security people trying to find and fix those weaknesses before hackers can use them.
So we're counting on some pretty smart people to stay one step ahead. But even with all that, it's still kind of scary to think that digital signatures, which we depend on for so much, aren't totally foolproof. Is there anything we can do to protect ourselves?
It all comes down to being aware and having good digital habits. Be careful about the websites you go to and the files you download. Make sure you know who sent you an email before you click any links or open attachments. Keep your software up to date because those updates usually have security fixes. And maybe most importantly, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. That's a classic sign of a phishing scam.
It's like real-life safety advice. Lock your doors, be aware of your surroundings, and don't take candy from strangers. Speaking of being aware, do you know any good resources where people can learn more about all this, like digital signatures, CAs, and just general online safety tips?
Definitely. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, they have tons of info on their website, including guidelines for digital signatures and cybersecurity best practices. There are also a bunch of reliable websites and organizations dedicated to teaching people about digital security. Just search for digital signature security tips online. You'll find a ton of helpful stuff.
Perfect. Knowledge is power. And the more we know about all this, the better we can protect ourselves. This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We got to see how digital signatures and certificate authorities work, and we learned that even the most secure systems can have weaknesses. But the biggest takeaway for me is that we as users have a responsibility to keep ourselves safe online. By staying informed, being careful, and taking action, we can be confident and secure in our digital lives.
I totally agree. It's all about taking control and doing what we can to reduce risks. Security is a journey, not a destination.
Absolutely. So to all our listeners out there, take a look at the trusted CAs in your browser settings. Do you know who they all are? Do some research and see what you find. Remember, knowledge is power. Now you have the tools to be safer and smarter online. Until next time, happy diving.
Yeah, he brought up some really clever attacks. One example was a collision attack. Remember how each digital signature uses that unique fingerprint, the one made by the hashing algorithm? Well, in a collision, attack hackers try to find two different documents that create the same fingerprint. And if they can do that, they could swap a legit document with a fake one, and the signature wouldn't be able to tell the
Oh,
difference.
wow.
It'd be like having a master key that can open any lock, like a huge security flaw.
That sounds so difficult.
How would they even do that? It takes a deep understanding of cryptography
Oh.
and a lot of computing power. They're basically trying to exploit weaknesses in the hashing algorithms themselves, trying to manipulate the data to get a specific output. It's a constant back and forth, with security researchers trying to find and fix those vulnerabilities before the hackers can exploit them.
So it sounds like it's a constant race to stay ahead of the bad guys. But even with all these safeguards, it's still kind of unsettling to think that digital signatures, which we rely on so much, aren't completely foolproof. What can everyday users like us do to stay safe?
It really comes down to awareness and good digital habits. Be cautious about the websites you visit and the files you download. Always double-check who sent you an email. Before you click on any links or open attachments, keep your software updated, because those updates often include security patches that fix those known vulnerabilities. And, maybe most importantly, be wary of anything that seems too good to be true. That's usually a sign of a phishing scam.
So it's like real-world security advice. Lock your doors, be aware of your surroundings, and don't take candy from strangers. Speaking of awareness, do you have any recommendations for resources where our listeners can learn more about this stuff, like digital signatures, CAs, and online security best practices?
Absolutely. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST for short. They have a ton of information on their website, including guidelines for digital signatures and cybersecurity best practices. There are also a lot of reputable online publications and organizations that are dedicated to educating the public about digital security. A simple web search for digital signature security tips can give you a ton of helpful information.
Awesome. Knowledge is power, as they say, and the more we understand about these systems, the better we can protect ourselves. This has been a truly eye-opening deep dive. We've uncovered the hidden world of digital signatures and certificate authorities, explored the complex relationship between security and efficiency, and learned that even the most sophisticated systems can have vulnerabilities. But most importantly, we've discovered that we as users have a crucial role to play in safeguarding our digital lives. By being informed, vigilant, and proactive, we can navigate the online world with confidence and peace of mind.
Well said. It's all about empowering ourselves with knowledge and taking action to reduce risks. Security is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time thing.
Absolutely. So, to our listeners out there, take a look at the trusted CAs in your browser settings. Do you recognize them all? Do a little research and see what you find. And remember, knowledge is power. Now you have the tools to be a more informed and secure digital citizen. Until next time, happy diving.